Hi everyone, this is Matthew versus Sanjeev, played on the 23rd of February. Let's get started. D4, G6. Yeah, I mean, this is perfectly fine opening. I just figure if they play D4, you should just play Knight F6 to stop E4, and then you get a proper King's Indian defense. What's this called? The modern opening, or the Perk, or the Pietz, or something like that. Rope batch defense. I think it's had like 4 different names over the years. So it allows E4, and this can get a bit passive for black. Black has to be very careful how he plays this. Knight C3, yep. D6, yeah. Knight F3, yep. E5, E4, whoa, wait, hang on. Okay, so if I just go back, I'll just put the infant analysis on. Yeah, so here, this is the tricky bit for black is how does he play this? You know, the book move here is Knight F6. And it's turning it more into a King's Indian. The difference between this and the King's Indian defense, though, is a king in King's Indian defense has a pawn here. In this particular opening, the bishop can sit on c4 and put enormous pressure along this diagonal here, which is a pain in the neck for black to deal with, especially since he wants to push e5 and f5. Playing e5 straight away, that just looks bad. Let's just white just swap queens off. He just takes here, and you don't dare take with the bishop because you do not want to give up this bishop for this measly knight. Particularly if you fianchetto your position, if this bishop gets traded off, this entire king side is just terrible. There's just holes everywhere, and this bishop's just going to run riot through these holes if this bishop trades off. So that forces a pawn to swap off, which lets white just swap queens, and now black can't castle anymore, and white's got better development. It's just better for white. White's doing very well here. So bishop e3, great move. Yeah, getting ready to castle queenside with check. It's really nice. And black's got all sorts of problems. He can't develop his king's knight here because he interferes with his pawn. And yeah, how does he play this? It's tricky because this king's going to waste a whole nother tempo. Maybe c6 or something, so that if white castles long, your king has this square here. Maybe he can set this up. The whole idea of putting the king on this square here is that it guards all the entry squares of enemy rooks. So even if white manages to quickly develop and double his rooks on the d file, there'll be no entry square. And this pawn is crucial because it stops the knight coming into d5 or b5. And you know, you can always play b6 if you want to keep knights or bishops out of c5 as well. That's how I'd be thinking of playing it if I was black. What black did though was knight f6. That just loses the e5 pawn. In fact, white can quickly castle long first with check and then grab the e-pawn. Grabbing the e-pawn straight away though looks really nice because you're threatening this knight fork. You don't let your opponent counter-sacrifice his knight with the idea of taking this knight or anything like that. So this is actually a good move. Now bishop e6 was played, defending the f-pawn. That makes sense. Now white should probably just castle queenside. Just bang, castle this off, check. And this is looking great for white. I mean, where does this king go? Maybe he has to just put a piece in the way or something, which is very uncomfortable for black. And white can start looking at things, you know, like even, you know, f4, f5, or f4, h3, g4, f5, start storming this majority up the board. You know, white's a pawn up, and he's got a central pawn majority, f and e pawns, and there's no black e pawn to counter that. So marching these central pawns up the board makes this the most sensible thing to do. Instead, he played knight f3. I think his logic seems to be steal the pawn, run away before there's any tactics, you know, and that's pretty sensible chess. Although I can't help but feel that maybe the knight doesn't want to be on f3. For one, it interferes with the f-pawn. This pawn either wants to go to f3 to keep e4 defended, or f4 to start a central pawn march, and this is kind of counter to those plans. Maybe d3 is a better spot, with the idea of aiming for the c5 square, which really annoys this bishop greatly. This bishop's just not going to have anywhere good to go. You know, the bishop might need to sit on c4 right away or something, you know, because otherwise if this knight gets to c5, where's the bishop going? You know, back to c8, and white would love to trade this knight for this bishop. Okay, so knight f3 was played. Yeah, and then knight fd7. I mean, getting out of the way of the bishop. Maybe he's looking to take this knight and double those pawns. I mean that's kind of that's reasonable. Although you'd be giving your opponent the two bishops in a fairly open position, and those two bishops are going to be very powerful. Instead, you know, maybe knight g4 is the way to go to put this bishop under pressure. You know, that might be a better way to handle this. The bishop's under fire. Black would love to take that bishop and give white doubled isolated pawns, and then his extra pawn on the king side doesn't mean as much anymore. And he's also introducing the same idea of sacking the bishop, well, not sacking, trading the bishop for the knight to double isolate these pawns. So something like knight g4 would be the move I'm looking at, and you know, white, in order to keep a fairly safe position, will want to play bishop d2, which it gets in the way of castling long. The rook is no longer checking the king, and this f2 pawn is under fire from the knight, so the king can't castle long anyway. So knight g4 looks like a decent move here. Just developing with knight bd7 looks good to me, or c6. When I say looks good, I mean these are more the sort of moves you should be looking to play in this position. Knight fd7 undevelops the knight. It actually blocks this knight in. Now c6 is not an option anymore, which means black's going to have to constantly worry about knights jumping into b5 or d5. So white then threw his knight straight into b5. Too early. That doesn't actually threaten anything. I mean, well, okay, maybe you're trying to grab this pawn here, but your opponent could just develop and get this knight out at the same time, or even better, just rip this pawn off, hitting the rook, and you don't have time to steal this pawn because your rook's in danger. Yeah, I mean, even if this pawn gets taken, is that really a big deal? If you take with the bishop, b6 traps the bishop in. If you take with the knight, c6 traps the knight in. So stealing this a pawn looks like you're on the road to losing a piece. So yeah, this move, I can't see it being very strong. So knight c6 was played, but I really do think bishop b2 is very strong here, because after rook b1, hitting the bishop just drops back somewhere, maybe back to g7 or something like that, or maybe f6 just to cover g5. And black has won his pawn back, and you know, he's actually doing okay, I think. You know, like I said, you can't take something like this. It's just too risky. You know, something like b6 immediately looks good because it kicks the knight back out to b5, and then this rook can try and zoom down here anytime it wants and get its pawn back. It's got the bishop on there as well. There's probably no rush to even take that pawn. You don't think you want to take with, you might want to take with the bishop. I don't know. Yeah, you do. Yeah, take with the bishop, and you're hitting the rook. Yeah, I was thinking, oh, the bishop's going to get pinned, but no, the bishop's on this diagonal, stopping all that nonsense. So yeah. Stealing that pawn would have been great, and knight b5, as you can see, is actually a blunder. He shouldn't have done that at all. Instead, he probably should have just, well, yeah, knight g5 looks pretty good to me. Threatening to just take the bishop and give your opponent an isolated pawn on e6, and you end up with the two bishops in an open position. It's quite strong, knight g5 here. Okay, so knight b5, knight c6 was played, just developing. There were stronger moves than that, but it's not too bad as far as moves go. I think according to the engine, it was like the second best move or something. Yeah. Bishop f4. Just trying to steal this, trying to do some sneaky stuff on this pawn here. It's very easily stopped. And according to the engine, it should just be ignored. You should just take this pawn still anyway, because after this, you can go bishop here. And if after bishop there they try to throw in this move here, you go king c8, and after rook b1 you've got, you know, I mean, according to the engine, you've got this check because the knight's trying to do two things at once. It's trying to defend this bishop and defend this square at the same time. And white's pawn structure is terrible. Isolated a pawn, whoops, isolated c pawn. It gives white good chances to get back in this game. Okay, he played bishop e5. But that just lets white trade his knight off for a bishop and leaving white with the two bishops. Yeah, maybe a6 is the way to go. Oh, maybe not. Maybe knight can jump into here. Yeah, yuck. That's probably no good. According to the engine, it's okay. Rook c8 maybe? Just defend it with the rook. There we go. This knight still looks very silly out here. Okay, the move played was bishop e5. That just allows knight takes. And then one of these knights can take the knight back. Black decided to take with this knight. It doesn't seem to be much difference, actually, to be honest, just looking at it. And then white castle queenside, and now he's threatening to just steal a free piece. And this is complicated. This is difficult to deal with. This pawn is on pre. I mean, as in this knight can't move because you end up losing this pawn here. So like f6 is needed here. You have to play f6 to defend this knight so that you don't lose this c pawn. Whoa, cancel. Yeah, I mean that's the best way to play it. He didn't play that though. He played king e7, which just gives up the c pawn. Just the knight just steals the pawn, and black's just very slowly losing this. He's now lost 2 pawns, and yeah, white's done pretty well. I mean, I didn't like this knight jumping out here. It turned out really good for him because he actually managed to do something with it. But I think with better defense from black, you'll find sending the knight out to b5 in the first place was not a good idea. So rook a8 was played, and then the knight traded for the bishop. That's good play by white. The king took because you want to isolate the pawn. That's fair enough. When you're in such a difficult position, it's understandable you'd want to do that. The king looks a little exposed, but white doesn't really have many pieces to try and take advantage of that. He played bishop b5. Just thinking, are there any other options that are good? The engine likes g3. I'm not sure why. Well, I think I know why, because of the idea of playing bishop h3 check. Bishop b5 developing the bishop seems sensible though. Rook hd8. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and now white's just trading. Trade. Rook takes. Knight takes has got to be the move, surely. Like the thing is, you don't want to swap all the pieces off. You don't want them traded off. This just allows more trades if you take with the rook. He can just now trade off a pair of rooks as well. With every single trade, white is getting closer to victory. Those 2 extra pawns is just a very easy endgame win. So black should be looking to avoid trades as much as possible. Is there a potential here maybe to move the knight, just get the knight completely out of trade range? Knight b6 or something. That would be what I'd be looking at. Just trying to keep the pieces on the board. Don't let them trade off, because the moment they trade off, white just wins easily. Okay, rook hd8, bishop takes d7, rook takes d7. Yeah, I think knight takes is better. And white just kept going with this. That's great. Knight takes. Okay, white. Yeah, okay, black had to do that. Then rook d1. Rook on the open file. White just needs to form a plan to slowly advance. He can either go for a queenside advance or a central advance. They're both pretty strong plans, and black just has to defend. Rook d8. Yeah, you shouldn't be challenging this rook. Like when you're material down, you just have to often let your opponent own the open file and instead look to control all the entry squares so that the rooks and pieces can't infiltrate into these squares. I guess there's nothing you can do to stop infiltration to d6. But yeah, I'd want to be keeping the rook on the half-open c file pointing at this king and maybe try and maneuver this knight to b4 somehow. I say somehow because it's tricky. Something like knight c5 threatening to win a pawn, and then knight a6 and knight b4, and trying to get some play that way. Yeah. Otherwise, just set up a defense. Just play rook knight here. Just leave it there and go king e7 after the rook checks, and just sit there and say, "Come get me." Sometimes that's the best you can do when you've got no options. Okay, so rook d8. Unfortunately, that. Yeah, I'm not too keen on this idea. Though white still has to make progress. The reason I wasn't keen on that idea is this knight is now tied down. If the knight ever moves, the rooks just swap off, and white is just that much closer to winning. So e5 was played. I don't know. It's hard to find the right plan. You do want to be playing e5, but you probably want to be playing f4 and g4 and e5 all together, get the pawns going up as one mass. Just an individual pawn like this, it's strong if there's a lot of pieces on the board, but if there's not many pieces left, this pawn might be a little overextended. It might be hard to defend. And in fact, f6, black tries to take advantage of the pawn being overextended immediately with f6. It doesn't work though. After take, it just loses the game because white just takes, and after knight takes, the rooks just swap off, and then the bishop goes to g5. It's pinned, and everything trades off, and it's just a very easy win. And that's what happened in the game. So let's just go back to here for a second and see if we can find a better option for black. Yeah, the better option for black is put the rook right back where it came from so that your knight is free to move. And maybe you can move the knight to here and then to here and just leave it sitting in e6 for a while. It's quite strong here. You can look to jump into d4 if white ever abandons the d file and it hits the bishop. And you might be able to set up some sort of bind with g5 and try and stop these pawns coming down. Okay, so what actually happened was f6, and this just loses. Just full swap off. Great stuff by Matthew there. He just saw it all. He just after pawn up, he just went, oh, beautiful, mass swap off of pieces. Really, black shouldn't take it. I know every other option looks incredibly terrible, but maybe king e8 is the way to play this. King e8 so that you don't swap any pieces off, and then playing something like rook here, even. Rook here and then eventually get the knight out and somewhere. I don't know, but playing knight takes f6 is just immediately resigning, basically. And let's just do a quick browse and see how this game unfolded. It doesn't really matter which side white decided to play on. Whoa, hang on. Okay, when you're advancing a majority in an endgame like this, always push the pawn that has no enemy pawn in front of it. When you push a different pawn, it gives your opponent the opportunity to do this, which basically means that his 2 pawns render your 3 pawns useless. You can't play a4, you can't play c4. There's 2 holes created here and here. And something like that might give black, black is still hopelessly lost. This king is just going to run over here and grab these pawns and use this as a decoy. But you still got to be a little bit careful. If you mess this up a bit, like if this pawn gets to here and defends this, this king has to run all the way in to get this pawn in order to get this pawn, which gives this black king time maybe to mop this pawn up and get over here and maybe grab these 2 or something. So there is a danger there. It's still winning. a6 was the move played. I think I prefer b5. And now king f3. Oh, still allows b5. It's still easily winning for white. He looks like he's doing the right thing. He's just using this as a decoy. Let's see how it worked. King h4. Yeah, he just says abandon that pawn. And by the time this king has mopped up this pawn and got over the queen side, it's too late. Great endgame technique by Matthew. I'm not sure about this b4 move, but the rest of it is just awesome technique, and it looks like he's just playing with his opponent right now. Yeah, and we'll just quickly go through these moves. Bang, bang, bang. Let's get 2 queens, and just does the usual queen, 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 queen. And at this point, and when I say queen, 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 I mean the queens are just moving in alternate files. And that's it. At this point, Sanjeev just resigned. Fair enough. He hung in there though. Great game by Matthew, excellent stuff. I hope all the things I pointed out early in the game are something that both players and everyone listening can learn from. Those are some of the trickiest positions in chess to play. They're not straightforward positions, they're planning type positions. And playing a position like this very well is difficult. And knowing things like this, c6, king c7 setup, just knowing about their existence will make you play these a lot better, these sorts of games a heck of a lot better. And the idea of, bringing in knights to squares like c5, c6 to keep knights out of d5, these are the sort of moves you want to be playing in these sorts of positions. Okay, guys, I hope everyone learned something from that. Thanks for listening. See you later.